Welcome, everyone, to the Fat Guys and Friends podcast. We are starting a special series today with the NFL season right upon us. We're in the middle of the preseason. We are going to do NFL previews, breaking down each division of the NFL, who's going to win the divisions, who is going to be in the playoffs, what records each team's going to go. My name is Colton Bartholomew. I am your co-host of the Fat Guys and Friends podcast. With me, as always, co-host and fellow fat man, Mr. Logan Wanger. How are you doing, sir?
Good. How are you, Bart?
Oh, I'm good, man. Football is back. Nothing is better.
It's almost football season, which means it's almost Madden season, which is one of the best times of the year. It's a good time to be a sports fan after the Armageddon of only having baseball throughout the summer.
Yeah, even the Olympics going on right now, man. It's like, all right. I can only pretend to be excited about swimming for so long.
They're kind of sports.
All right.
No disrespect to any Olympians, but it's not football.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any Olympian fans. But, like I said, we picked every game this season because despite Logan being married and me having a full-time job, we still don't have lives and we have lots of time on our hands to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So
don't do a lot.
So we will go through each team on all these podcasts. There'll be 8 of these. We'll be bringing on lots of friends talking about their favorite teams and their team's division. Lots of smack talk going on in this series. But today we are going to start with the NFC West. And the reason we're going to start with the NFC West is because 2 of the best teams in that conference are in that division, as you'll see as we go through. Now the format...
And because it's our podcast and we're going to do whatever the hell we want.
That too. Now, the format of these podcasts will be, we'll talk about what each team got in the draft and free agency, what they lost in free agency, or who they released or retired, and then talk about the team in general, some of their main storylines going into the season, and then talk about our record predictions for them and how far we think they could go in the playoffs. So with that in mind, we are going to start our NFC West preview with the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers coming off a rough year where they had a JV offensive line coach as a head coach. And
poor Jim Tomsula.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was
just doomed to fail from the beginning.
For real, and he looked like a cartoon character of what a bad NFL coach would look like.
Just picture your typical yes man. Just, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll coach a team for you. Yeah, I don't care. Just Jim Tomsula in a nutshell.
And we saw the absolute regression and then mental breakdown of Colin Kaepernick until they finally shut him down for the year. So lots of interesting things for the Niners last season. Logan, what do you have for acquisitions and departures for the Niners this year?
They added absolutely no one of note. Their big acquisition I have down is Chip Kelly. That's it.
Yeah.
They did absolutely nothing in the offseason. They lost Alex Boone, who is a very good offensive lineman, but still an offensive lineman that really don't make big splashes in NFL talk. So the 49ers really stood pat with their god-awful team.
They did, and it was rumored pretty much throughout the offseason until pretty much draft night that my Denver Broncos were making a hard charge for Colin Kaepernick. And I was on board with that until I heard just, Elway didn't like him or wasn't going to pay as much as he wanted. And eventually it kind of came out that Colin Kaepernick wasn't thrilled about going to Denver, which makes no sense. But that's for another podcast.
I would still be better off with Colin Kaepernick than Mark Sanchez.
Yep. I mean, we'll see. But what do you have for departures for the 49ers? You mentioned Alex Boone. Anybody else make your list?
Nope. Like I said, they didn't do really anything with this roster.
Kind of an interesting mindset, just because when you bring in a guy like Chip Kelly, you know that your style of play and what is expected of each position is going to change to go with, like you said, almost identical roster as last season. Kind of an interesting thought process with changing your system like that.
Yeah, I mean, Colin Kaepernick makes sense to run the offense, but Carlos Hyde doesn't seem like a running back that would fit the system. I don't know who Colin Kaepernick is throwing the ball to anymore. I think Torrey Smith is the only wide receiver I can think of on that roster. I mean, Vernon Davis is long gone. Do they have people that play tight end in San Francisco? I don't know anything about this team because they're that bad.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I am not a Chip Kelly believer, and that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. Chip Kelly's offense worked in college so well because the talent gap that you can have between a third receiver at a school like Oregon and a third defensive back is a huge gap. In the NFL, that third corner was the number one corner usually at his college. You know,
He just or like 1B.
Or the number two, and just out of team necessity, or they saw the skills in him, he moved to nickel in the NFL. There's only a few guys per draft class or like generation that are really like ultimate mismatches, and even then, there are guys that seem to get their number somehow. So, Chip Kelly's offense that's so predicated on finding physical mismatches, that is so much harder in the NFL as opposed to having a real scheme and just depending on execution.
And to go off of your point, I feel like the NFL conditioning overall is so much better that this hurry up and go offense just won't work as much. Because when you do that at Oregon, you're going to gas out some teams, just running 80 to 90 to almost 100 plays a game. Defenses are just going to get tired, but you're having people in the NFL are such superior athletes than the middle linebacker you're going to get at Arizona State. Like, this is the best of the best in the NFL. They're not going to get gassed out when you keep running just the same plays at them over and over, because that's really what Chip Kelly's offense is. Yeah, they do a lot of motion. Yeah, they try to get people the ball in weird ways. But if you look at it, it's a lot of the same things over and over again, and people catch on because they're really good to be in the NFL.
Exactly, and to your point, the Chip Kelly offense, there's only so many route combinations that exist, you know? Like, everybody knows those. And Chip Kelly's offense, when you boil it down, it's somewhere in the 40-ish plays. You know, it's just what can you make, how can you disguise that play? What can you make it look like to throw the defense off? And to your point, defenses aren't, you know, as confused or are just better at stopping those inside runs that are kind of the bread and butter of the offense. When those are only getting 1 yard as opposed to 5 or 6 a pop, it's really going to slow your offense down. And we saw that with Chip Kelly's time in Philadelphia, because they had a huge issue with their defense getting gassed out because the offense would go 3 and out so fast that their defense is right back on the field, and then they'd get torched.
And I don't think that Chip Kelly is a bad coach by any means. I just think he needs to change his scheme. Like, why couldn't Chip Kelly come up with a pro-style offense that he think would work in the NFL? Because he's got to be a great football mind to keep getting these jobs. I mean, he came from nowhere out of New Hampshire to get this high-profile job at Oregon. Now he's in the NFL. Now he's in one of the most historic franchises in NFL history, even though they've been garbage for the last few years. 49ers are still one of the best franchises ever in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Like, they've been so bad for so long now, but
yeah, they had
really
their run with Harbaugh, but wait, like for a long time between Steve Young and Harbaugh, they were trash.
Yeah, but they were in the Super Bowl. Was it 5 years ago? 6 years ago?
Yep, 5 years ago.
It's recently, within the last decade.
Yeah, and
they've just fallen off the face of the earth.
And obviously, a huge part of that was all the guys that retired that year after Jim Harbaugh left.
Oh, man.
I mean,
I forgot about
that. They lost so much talent that was so integral to that team. But
and they were all so young.
Yeah, so young, and it was kind of one of those. It's going to go down as one of those great what ifs because they had so much talent, and they had the coach that everybody seemed to at least get along with enough outside of the general manager. And that's kind of one of the things I want to talk with you too. Is do you feel like you mentioned Chip needs a change, but the 49ers, I'm assuming, hired him for that offense. Do you feel like Chip was humbled enough in the bad luck, not bad luck, or just, you know, the poor play that his Eagles had, that maybe he's going to be more receptive to new ideas and not act like he's, conquered the NFL when he went 10-6 his first year?
No. I think he's going to keep trying to run his offense. I don't think it's going to work in San Francisco, mainly because he doesn't have the playmakers to get it done. I mean, if he had the type of athletes he had in Oregon when he was running this offense, maybe it would work better. I mean, you can't expect Sam Bradford to run this offense with all this motion and moving around and stuff. So maybe Colin Kaepernick can run it better, but they might not even start Colin Kaepernick, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't think Chip Kelly works in San Francisco, and I think he's back in college within 2 years.
Wow. That's the thing. You look at Kaepernick physically, and you would think, oh, with that offense, and Chip likes to move the quarterback around, do some option stuff, that Kaepernick would be the guy you would want. But in reality, what that system's quarterback has to be is just pinpoint accurate. You just have to get the ball and put it right on the guy's hands because the plays happen so quick. And Kaepernick has a little bit of elongated delivery, and his biggest issue last year before he had his little mental breakdown was that he was so inaccurate and his mechanics were so off that he just couldn't play. He couldn't physically get the job done. And if it's him or if it's Blaine Gabbert, Gabbert is a little bit more prototypical in the sense of fundamentals and throwing motion and everything. But he's a small guy, and he had a little bit of success last year, but he's never proved anything. I don't see a lot of great things coming from the Seattle or this San Francisco team this year.
Yeah, you're in bad shape when you're trying to make a case for why Blaine Gabbert should be your starting quarterback.
It's so true. And defensively, you feel bad for a guy like Navarro Bowman, who is going to be on a defense that gets torched all year, but he's still one of the best players in the NFL. He's
just going to waste away on that San Francisco defense.
Yeah, in a prime year of his career. I think he's entering his 8th year. Obviously, he had that bad injury a couple of years ago, but had a year to recover, and he actually played well at times last season. It's just when you're on a team that bad, it's tough to stand out as a defensive player.
And Navarro Bowman, not for lack of talent, but could be in for another rough year, because you mentioned it before. Look what happened to the Philadelphia defense when Chip Kelly was there. They're going to continue to run these plays and not succeed and get 3 and outs. You're going to get tired as a defense.
Yeah, and when you play the type of linebacker that Bowman does, which is that sideline to sideline, can cover pretty much everybody in his zone and is a huge run stopper, it's even more physically taxing. So you're right, if they have to suffer some increase in plays, even if the 49ers offense, miraculously finds some success, if it happens too quick, then you're still not giving your defense enough time off to get recovered.
Exactly. I mentioned it before. I don't see the Chip Kelly experiment working in San Francisco because of this.
And I'm with you. And I don't think they have the assets to quickly get better. And it's not like they're missing 1 or 2 pieces. They're down 10. And
yeah, they're a ways away from being a good football team.
Yeah, and they didn't give Chip that player control element that he had in Philadelphia, which was kind of his downfall, which I don't blame them for. But at the same time, if you're not listening to this guy who has this system that's very specific and has very, nuanced things they need from each spot, then you kind of waste having that guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to give the guy the keys to the car with a gimmick offense, you need players that are going to fill that gimmick offense. And like I said, Carlos Hyde isn't that guy. Torrey Smith kind of is, but you need more than one receiver. If he doesn't start Colin Kaepernick, I will be amazed. Colin Kaepernick was built for this offense, and if you sit him on the bench, why? Why?
The only thing that I could say would be the accuracy point that I brought up earlier, but I would tend to agree with you. I just think talent-wise, he's a much better player than Gabbert, and you're going to need a guy that can make some plays on his own when you have that roster. But let's jump over to our record predictions, because I feel like we're on the same page that this is going to be a rough year for the Bay Area, at least in football.
Yeah. Signing that Kevin Durant feller may help him on the basketball
side.
side,
Maybe touch. So, Wayne, what do you see the Niners going this season?
I looked over their schedule, and I didn't see a lot of wins. And by a lot, I mean 2. I see them going 2-14. Worst team in the NFL.
Woo! You know, I'm acting surprised, but I'm not far behind you. I've got them at 3-13, and right up there contending for that number 1 draft pick this season. Just a lack of talent and a tough schedule, obviously, with their division. Got a couple other good teams in there. Just not going to be a good year.
I say that division has 3 good teams in it this year. Hot take.
Hot take. All right. Since I know everybody kind of knows the top 2 in that division where they've been the last couple of years, let's jump over to the team that I feel like we're going to disagree the most on in all of our podcasts here, the Los Angeles Rams. Still weird to say. It's going to be weird for a few years.
Very weird to say.
But they are now in L.A., the subject of Hard Knocks. Interesting first episode, kind of getting NFL players into training camp and living in a dorm and doing some interesting things as opposed to, you know, the nicer situation they had going when they were in St. Louis.
And for those who don't know, I reside about an hour away from St. Louis. So the Rams getting ripped away was kind of in my neck of the woods, so I got to hear about it a lot.
For sure, and I understand all the financial arguments for having a team in LA because it's obviously the second biggest city in the country, hugest media market. You know, it's Hollywood, it's everything. And if Stan Kroenke wants to build this awesome stadium that's going to have, you know, NFL Network studios in there and they can hold the draft there and all that stuff, yeah, I understand all that. But I mean, man, outside of them not wanting to build a new stadium because, sorry, our tax dollars should go to something more important. Like, St. Louis was a really good fan base. They came out for all those games. They won a Super Bowl there.
They're very
good
good to that team. They were very, very good to that team. I mean, look at St. Louis Cardinal fans. I mean, I know that team is obviously better, but they're so loyal to that team.
Yeah, I mean...
And people loved the Rams in St. Louis. They really did.
And you can look at their home record for even the last, I think it's like 10 years. They're always up there in attendance because they have a loud, dedicated fan base. And it was always a tough place to play. I mean,
remember the greatest show on turf legitimately had a home field advantage because that dome would get so loud.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the glory days of those guys, they were good and they were loud.
And even more recently, when they haven't been that great, they still pull off upsets all the time, and especially at home. They had good fans, so it does kind of suck to see that market get their team taken away. But kind of over and done with, so we'll see how the apathetic LA crowd, you know, adjust to having NFL football again. What do you have down for Los Angeles' acquisitions and departures?
Their big additions in free agency were Cody Sensabaugh, a decent corner from Tennessee, Quentin Coples, a defensive end coming over from the Jets, and Dominique Easley, a very talented defensive tackle from the Patriots. They obviously traded up for the number 1 overall pick as well to draft Jared Goff. And they lost Nick Fairley, a very big man clogging up the middle. Janoris Jenkins, cornerback, took off. Rodney McLeod, a very above-average safety. James Laurinaitis, who really was the face of the defense for many, many years. Chris Long was also right there with him on the defense. He also departed. And Jared Cook, a very underrated tight end, signed with the Green Bay Packers.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with Goff. You mentioned him at number 1 draft pick. They traded up to get him. This draft class, I don't think was, you know, stocked with NFL-ready quarterback talent. I think all those 3 guys that got drafted in the first round, Paxton Lynch, Jared Goff, and Carson Wentz, they're all projects. But It appears from everything I've read and watching Hard Knocks that they are grooming Goff to walk in and be the day 1 starter. And I am not sold yet that he is that guy.
I think since they traded up to get him at number 1, and they just moved to a different city, you can't tell a fan base, hey, we traded assets to get to the number 1 spot. We think this guy's worth it. and then trot out Case Keenum ahead of him day one.
Oh, I'm totally with you there. They have to start him almost. But
Yeah. There's no way you can convince the fans to get behind Case Keenum over Jared Goff.
true, I'm totally with you there. I'm just saying from a physical skill wise and being ready, I don't think he's there yet. Not like the number one pick for the last few years at quarterback and at Jameis Winston. He had an NFL arm, an NFL body, and obviously he made some mistakes last year, but he looked the part. Guys like Luck and Newton the last few years at least looked the part. They have those physical abilities. I'm not sure Goff has those yet.
I know he obviously has room to improve, but I think he's walking into one of the best situations for a rookie starting quarterback in the last few years, because he went to Cal, so he gets to stay in his home state that he's been in for how many years. So he gets to stay there. He comes in to a team that has a pretty good defense. The Rams had a sneaky good defense last year. And the main thing is he comes into a team with an established running game. Todd Gurley, I believe, won Rookie of the Year last year, Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Sure did.
Yeah, he was phenomenal last year. I know teams are probably going to stack the box this year, and it's unlikely that'll have the impact that he had, or to the same extent that he had last year. But he was so good. So say they do stack the box, now Jared Goff gets to play with single coverage. Any NFL quarterback should be able to throw against single coverage, even if you are a rookie still developing. But it's going to be easier than teams having to throw into double teams or cover one, cover two with help over the top. So he's coming into a pretty good spot to succeed. It's going to be on him to succeed now.
Okay, I hear you there. Here's my counter to it, though. You're right that it would appear likely that he's going to be against some more single coverage and some easier to read defenses. But who is he throwing to? So far, I've seen Kenny Britt and Tavon Austin. And aside from Tavon Austin being very fast, I don't think either one would be someone that we would call a top flight receiver or a really
true.
big, really threatening target.
That's fair. He doesn't have many targets there. And I almost said St. Louis out of habit in L.A.
And that's the thing. There's only so many carries that you can give Gurley, and especially you got to remember too, he had a traumatic knee injury in college. Obviously had a great year last year and appears to be over it, but that's always going to be a factor. You never want to overtax him because he's already got a leg that's suffered enough.
Yeah, but then you can counter and point to Adrian Peterson, who had a horrific knee injury, came back sooner than people thought, and it hasn't been an issue since.
True. That's fair.
Not saying that Todd Gurley is an Adrian Peterson type player, though.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, Gurley is a type of runner that at least appears to be smart enough to know how to get hit. Like the injury that we were talking about in college, that's a freak accident. It's just getting hit from a terrible angle and you never saw it coming. But you saw it in the league last year. He would get so low and have his shoulders way out in front of him and really, he's getting hit hard as a running back because they always do, but he's falling forward and he's, protecting himself as much as you can.
Yep.
Switching over to LA's defense, you mentioned underrated unit. They have one of the better pass rushes in the league, starting with Aaron Donald. Really, outside of J.J. Watt, probably the best pass rusher that puts his hand on the ground every play.
Right. Yeah, Aaron Donald is probably the best player in the NFL that nobody talks about.
True, and it's deserved a little bit because when you're scratching for 500, how individually how great can you be? But
very true.
But he is a guy that will generate pass rush no matter what. Double team, when they only rush 4 and he's getting double teamed with a running back or whatever, he's still going to push the pocket. He's still going to do things that force the other quarterback to make mistakes. And that is kind of what they've predicated their defense on, because you mentioned they brought in Sensabaugh. They used to have Janoris Jenkins, but he left. Their corners have been solid, but not anything special. They're not like lockdown guys. So they really depend on that pass rush getting there to make those guys' jobs easier.
Yeah, another player that I didn't mention as an acquisition, but almost is in a way, is Robert Quinn, who's coming back from injury last year. Didn't play a whole lot, but when healthy, is also a phenomenal pass rusher.
True. And we've been, when you and I have talked on, off the podcast or in some of the other previews that you guys will hear at a later date, just when you have two pass rushers, you basically put the offense in a position of, well, we're either going to double team one of them and hope against hope that a one-on-one on the other one holds up, or we double team them both and limit our passing options. And it's a lose-lose for the offense because more often than not, pass rush one-on-one wins.
Exactly. Defenses are getting really good, and especially, I was going to say two edge rushers, but Donald isn't even an edge rusher. He's getting pressured from the defensive tackle position, which doesn't even happen anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
just shows how good that guy is.
He is so versatile. He can play every technique on that D-line, and even moved out to end a few times last year after Quinn got hurt.
Yeah, just being... I'm pretty sure he's over 300 pounds, and he played defensive end in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's right on the border. I think he's in the high 200s. But yeah,
that guy's a monster.
Yeah, and if you watch Hard Knocks, they had a scene where Mike Singletary, who's a defensive assistant for the Rams, is talking about, he calls him 99, that's his number. He says, the 99's a special kid. Like, I don't think I've seen a guy like that. And if Mike Singletary is praising you like that, a guy that played on the 85 Bears and has coached a lot of great defensive players,
one of the best defensive minds in NFL history.
Yeah. Unfortunately, just gets pigeonholed because he was a bad head coach. They're different jobs, people.
Exactly. If you just focus on defense like he's doing now, he's really, really good at it. Just don't give him the keys to the car and expect him to win football games by coaching offense sometimes.
For sure. So, I said we were going to disagree, and let me jump to our record predictions because I'm going to shock you. I know I sounded a little bit positive, and I do like a lot of their guys in their defense, but I just think that this year is going to be like a year from hell from them or for them.
Oh, no.
I just see a lot of things going wrong. I think Goff is going to struggle mightily, even with the good running game. And then teams are going to load up a 7-8 man box and limit Gurley. And I think they're going to lose so many one-possession games because their offense can't get it done, even though their defense keeps them in it. So my prediction for them is 3-13. And this is,
oh my God.
And this is finally the year that Jeff Fisher gets fired. Because for whatever reason, Jeff Fisher can get away with being mediocre for like a decade and never get fired.
3-13.
I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Outside of Gurley, their offense is garbage.
This is the biggest discrepancy we will have on any team. I guarantee.
I guarantee it too. That's what I said.
I don't even have to look at any other records that I have down. I don't even think I'm super high on them, and I am astonished that you think 13-3 for this team.
3-13.
3-13. Excuse me.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I think this is something bad's going to happen, like either a Gurley injury or Aaron Donald goes down, and I just see a lot of bad things happening, and Jeff Fisher's out. This is it.
I couldn't disagree more. I think Jared Goff is a big step up from Case Keenum. Case Keenum had success at Houston, but is a glorified game manager. Yeah, he's got a big arm. That's really it. It's got to be on target if you're throwing the ball that far down the field. Todd Gurley, probably a top 5-7 running back in the league right now.
Agreed.
If you're into fantasy football, he's way up there on those lists. Very, very good football player. I totally agree they don't really have the targets on offense. That's going to be where they struggle and where Goff might struggle a little. But this defense is very underrated. I know they lost a lot of pieces. They got a lot of up-and-comers. I think Jeff Fisher finally gets over the hump of the 7-9s and the 8-8s and comes in at 9-7 and narrowly misses out on the playoffs.
Okay. And so part of my prediction is that Fisher loses his job. So you're saying Jeff Fisher is leading LA next year?
I don't know if you can fire a coach after a 9-7 season.
Fair. I mean, if you're not going to do it after 6-10 or 7-9, you can't do it when they're getting better, right?
Exactly. With a winning record, you have no excuse to fire the guy then.
Okay. So, big discrepancy there. I'm very down on LA, even though they do have some talent that I can't really explain to you why that's going to fail, but I just feel it. So, big discrepancy there. Let's move over to a team that was in the NFC Championship game for about 30 seconds last year, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. Like I mentioned, made the playoffs. They won their division, so they were the number 2 overall seed, right behind the Carolina Panthers. Made it to the NFC Championship game, and Carolina proceeded to blow them out and embarrass them and their families and children and disgrace all of them.
It was brutal.
Wang, what do you have for Arizona's pickups and losses?
They signed the guard that you know a little bit about, Evan Mathis, from the Broncos.
Sure do.
They signed safety Tyvon Branch from the Chiefs and traded for Chandler Jones, very talented pass rusher from the Patriots. In that trade, they traded away an offensive lineman, Jonathan Cooper. They lost Rashard Jones, a safety, Gerard Powers, a cornerback, and Sean Witherspoon, a decent middle linebacker.
All right. Let's start on the offensive side. You mentioned picking up Mathis. A big part of their struggle at Carolina and the game that they lost last season was they weren't protecting Carson Palmer. And Palmer, at this point in his career, any pressure is going to send his mind haywire. That's just the guy he is. When you keep him clean, he's one of the best quarterbacks out there. But he just cannot handle having guys around him. So I think...
Yeah, ever since that freak knee injury when he was with the Bengals against the Steelers, Kimo Van Olhoffen rolling him up. Just since then, he's been very, very skittish. What due reason, I suppose. I mean, I've never had my ACL torn, and I assume it hurts a lot, and I wouldn't want it to happen again if it happened to me.
Yeah, I don't blame him either. It's just when the other team knows that we just got to get close and it's going to affect them, it does change a little bit of what they have to do defensively. I think Mathis, getting a little bit older as a player, I believe he's entering his 12th season. Super effective for the Broncos last year, even though he battled a couple of nagging injuries. Was out there, I think, 13 games and ended up starting the Super Bowl. Did very well as a free agent pickup. Kind of looking to bring Chase a little bit here again because the Cardinals are a team that have the talent to make it to that level. Do you feel like, aside from his problems with pressure, Carson Palmer is a quarterback that could be a Super Bowl winning quarterback?
With the weapons he has in Arizona, I say yes. Carson Palmer, he doesn't really make people better, but he doesn't make them worse either. He does everything you want as a quarterback, I mean, besides evading pressure, like you said. But he's got the arm to make the throws, he's got pretty good accuracy, he's a smart guy. With the weapons he's got, and Larry Fitzgerald, and John Brown, and David Johnson in the backfield, David Johnson is an up-and-coming running back who could do big things in Arizona. But Carson Palmer, overall, I wouldn't call him elite by any means, but a very, very, I would say, an above-average quarterback in the NFL.
I would agree with you. I think you're close. I would agree with you that he's not going to be the guy that you point to as like, oh, he won them the game. He got it to the right guys, would be his description. I think he fits so perfectly what Bruce Arians likes to do, though, because he does have a big arm. He does like throwing deep, and the route combinations and the way that they call their offense, where they're going for home runs a lot, it does create situations where one big play, can set up their quarters or set up halves for them that they can score 3 touchdowns in a quarter, or come back with you at a counter play of a play that maybe you stopped once and get a big play and score. They led the league in plays over 40 yards last season, and that's kind of indicative just that's their game plan. They're always going for that big shot.
And Bruce Arians is such an amazing quarterback mind. Like when he was in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger, made Ben Roethlisberger a better quarterback. His time in Indianapolis when he was with Andrew Luck made Andrew Luck a much better quarterback. And now with Carson Palmer in Arizona, People thought Carson Palmer was just going there to be the end of his career and fizzle out. But he turned him into almost an MVP candidate last year.
Oh yeah, I mean, had the Carolina Panthers not gone 15-1, Cam gone like Super Saiyan, Palmer is right there.
Exactly. He had a very, very good season last year, and I give a lot of that credit to Bruce Arians.
I'm with you. And you mentioned a guy that I want to talk about, David Johnson. True story, went to Clinton High School in Clinton, Iowa. I played him 6 times throughout high school. And
he's a Uni Panther too, isn't he?
Say that again?
Uni Panther, University of Northern Iowa.
Yeah, Northern Iowa Panther,
Yeah.
Yep. Absolute freak, and he's been a freak since he was 15. Like, just the sheer speed that guy has, and was able. It's crazy, you know, when a guy's fast in high school and you see him, you're like, oh man, like there's no concept you have of how that translate, how it continue to grow as a collegiate athlete, and then when you get to the pros. But then last season, week 2 against the Bears, opening kickoff, nobody touches him because he ran through 3 tackles. And when I mean ran through them, a guy is setting up to tackle him, and he sprints by them. I mean, absolute freak. And I feel like they're going to expand his role as a straight-up running back, because last year they kind of used him as a hybrid return man, lots of receiving yards out of the backfield, and a little bit as a rusher. They had Chris Johnson and Andre Ellington kind of filling those roles as the handoff running back. But do you feel like he's a guy that can kind of establish himself as a do-it-all number 1 type running back?
Oh yeah, I think he, like I said, one of the more up-and-coming running backs in the league. I don't think we're going to see him returning much more this year.
No.
Because Arians is going to want him to be a bigger part of the offense. You're not going to stick your number 1 running back out there as a returner and risk injury like that. But even for being, he's not a very big guy, but he can go in between the tackles.
Yeah.
If he sees a hole, like you said, he hits it and he's gone.
Yeah.
He has got stupid speed.
And, you know, you're right, he's not a big guy. He's not like an Adrian Pearson, like hulking guy. But he has some mass up top that allows him to sustain hits and keep moving. And that's really where he can separate himself, because that is a tough combination to be able to maintain throughout a season, but he's able to do it.
Yeah, I feel like him knowing he's going to be the number 1 now, maybe he put on a little more mass too, because you need some mass to take hits in the NFL.
For sure.
You can't be, I mean, look at Jamal Charles, just to bring up a guy. He's a scrawny little guy, and he seems to get hurt almost every other season. So you got to have some build on you to take these hits.
For sure. And let's jump over to Arizona's defense, because they're a very talented unit as well. Led, I would say, at this point, led by their secondary. They did at one time have a better front 7, but now that their secondary has matured, I mean, you've got Patrick Peterson as a shutdown corner on one side, and then they just signed Tyrann Mathieu, their safety, to huge money, which he's really shown he
even
deserves.
Plays a little bit of cornerback too, though.
Yeah, true.
He moves all around in that secondary.
He's able to play safety because he's got that ball hawking mentality and can make so many big plays for you. And where do you think the ceiling is for that defense? Could they be a defense that is in that top 1 or 2 by season's end?
1 or 2 might be a stretch. Top 5, I would say, yeah, because you mentioned the secondary, but I think trading for Chandler Jones really puts them over the top, just because that's what they were really lacking, is that pass rusher who can get off the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had John Abraham in recent years, who was at the end of his career. They had Dwight Freeney.
Yeah, they had Freeney last year, who they only played on 3rd down, and he actually was decently effective, but when you're only out there for maybe a little bit less than a third of the plays.
But now you trade for the brother of an insane UFC fighter. he's going to get you some sacks.
True, and Chandler Jones has proved that he is a top-level D-end. I mean, he's probably in that second tier of pass rushers when you're looking at outside linebackers and D-ends, but he's a guy that can do a lot of things, super athletic.
Then you also have to wonder what made the Patriots trade him, though.
I mean,
you assume Belichick's got to be smart enough. He's not going to trade away a super good player like that. There's got to be a reason.
I mean, a big part of it was his his run-in with synthetic marijuana where he ended up naked on like a Thursday before a game. So
Yep.
that wasn't a good look, and Belichick's not about that life. So it's kind of clear at this point that the Jones family has abuse problems, substance abuse problems.
Easily addictive, I suppose.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to say it. But I do think you're right that just as an individual, he can make pass rushes by himself and then can leave the secondary more time, or excuse me, can decrease the time the secondary has to cover. So with the guys that they have so much talent back there, it's going to be really hard for opposing offenses to move the ball downfield.
Exactly, which is only going to make those corners probably ball hawk even more because they know the ball's going to be coming sooner.
And then I'm excited for Patrick Peterson's inevitable Twitter war with either Richard Sherman or Josh Norman or whatever other corner where they rank themselves like this is a real-life Madden game.
Which is so awesome.
It's funny,
and
man.
I love that Sherman and Norman are the two guys they always go after. One, because they're probably the next corners in line, but two, they're two of the biggest personalities in football.
Yeah, they'll
Especially
respond.
Sherman.
That's why they go after.
I love Richard Sherman. His whole Crabtree rant was one of the best things that's ever happened to the game of football. It was awesome.
Oh, I don't like talking about that season though. Like fuck 'em.
Fair. That's fair.
So rough. You know, I've seen highlights of the second half because I wasn't conscious for it. But man, if that team can get back to that, yikes. And you know what? Since we're talking about, let's quickly do the Arizona record so we can jump over. It sounds like we both are kind of in that same vein. We think Arizona's going to be one of those teams that's in that top tier. I've got to go in 12-4 and being actually a wild card in the NFC playoffs.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have them a little worse. I have them at 11-5. I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back just because Carson Palmer is a year older and he is a little more skittish. But I have them at 11-5 and also getting a wild card in the NFC.
Gotcha. Okay. Last team in the division here, Seattle Seahawks. A team that is just there, man. They are absurdly talented and crazy young. As much as I hate them and as badly as they embarrassed my Broncos a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl, you can't deny that they drafted so well and have been able to manage their money to keep a lot of these guys. And they've got Russell Wilson to a decently fair contract, compensating him for how good he is and still leaving the team the ability to go get guys. They're just a well-run organization. To that end, Wang, what do you have for their acquisitions and departures?
They brought in Chris Clemens, a pretty good defensive end. They brought back Brandon Browner, who left the team for a little while, but now is back with them. For losses, they lost Russell Okong, who went to your Denver Broncos. J.R. Sweezy, another talented interior lineman. Bruce Irvin is a big loss for them, who went over to the Oakland Raiders, a very good outside pass rusher. And probably the biggest loss of all, who retired during the Super Bowl nonetheless, was Marshawn Lynch, hanging up the cleats.
Definitely. Let's start with beast mode there. I mean, I'd never liked his whole media thing just because stop being a baby, answer with two words.
You're an NFL player, talk to the media, it's not that bad.
Yeah, sorry they're exposing your brand and all that garbage you did.
Yeah.
But
sorry you get paid millions of dollars and people want to talk to you about football.
Yeah.
Boo-hoo.
Yeah, cry about it. But anyways,
Yeah.
Thomas Rawls, the guy who stepped in for Marshawn Lynch last year when Lynch was hurt, did outstandingly well. Was on the track to being, a top running back this season. Then broke his fucking ankle, which is hard to do, and God, that looked awful.
Yeah, it didn't look good at all, but I was with you on Rawls. It's one of the main reasons I think the Seahawks will still be a good football team is they're not losing much in the run game. Rawls is he's almost just a younger version of Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, and obviously a little bit smaller because the combination of size and speed that Lynch had was...
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get another Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah.
If you ever forget how good Marshawn Lynch was, just remember that beast mode run against the Saints in the playoffs.
Yeah, the one that started
probably the greatest run in NFL history.
And I think Rawls can step right back into those shoes that he was in last season. Because, I mean, the Seahawks were kind of mired in all that stuff with Cam Chancellor not being there. They were losing games. They were right around 500 a few weeks into the season. Chancellor comes back. Marshawn Lynch ended up getting hurt. But then that offense really became a lot better through the air. And then, in turn, Rawls had so much room to run. They were an insanely good offense in the last few weeks of the season. Do you kind of see Rawls being that key piece like he was late last year?
Yeah, like I said, I think he's just a younger version of Marshawn Lynch. But one of the main reasons I think the Seahawks offense was so good was the emergence of Doug Baldwin. People made fun of the Seahawks for so long for not having a legit number one target. Then they traded for Jimmy Graham, and everybody thought Jimmy Graham was going to be the key to the offense. He ends up tearing his patellar tendon. He has to relearn how to walk before this season. But Doug Baldwin was insane last year. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember the exact stat, and I might sound stupid, but through like week 10 or whatever, nobody else besides Jerry Rice had as many touchdowns as he did. So if you're getting mentioned with Jerry Rice, you're doing something right as a wide receiver.
I think you have it flipped. I think it was from week 10 to the end of the season.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, because I had
there was some stuff.
As dumb as I hate saying this out loud, but
I'm not very prepared for.
Well, no, I'm saying I had him in fantasy, and he just tore it up the last 2 months. So, but you're right. I mean, he's always been a good route runner, but he really was able to start creating a lot more separation in those routes. And then Russell Wilson got a little bit more protection because that was a big problem for him. The Seahawks early last year was they weren't getting protection, and when they finally did, Russell Wilson was able to find those guys and make a lot of big plays. And I feel like their offensive line kind of stayed about where it needs to be for them to be good. And offensively, you mentioned, Jimmy Graham might not be there, but maybe it just works better. They're faster like that, and they can let Russell Wilson kind of run the show better without having a target they need to force it to.
I don't know if I'm going to say an offense is ever better without Jimmy Graham, but I feel like a year, maybe the injury could be a little bit of a blessing in disguise to just let him stand back and see what the offense should look like before he goes back in. Give him another time to learn the offense, and now ease him back in bit by bit, and maybe he can actually produce in the offense.
True.
Because when he got hurt, he had not done. I believe he got hurt in Week 8 against the Steelers. And he had only had about 600 yards and 2 touchdowns up until then, which not very good.
Yeah, which I mean was
especially coming over from the Saints, where he was a dominant force.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you would think for a team that was really lacking that red zone target, they went out and got one. Props to them. But then it's like, wow, what happened?
Yeah.
But let's jump over to the defense. You mentioned they lost Bruce Irvin, and obviously a phenomenal outside rusher. Really paired so well with Michael Bennett, their other pass rusher. Do you feel like Chris Clement or maybe whoever else they're going to have to kind of rotate in at that spot is going to be able to be that same dynamic, or are we going to see that pass rush take a step back a little bit?
I think it's going to take a step back, definitely, because Bruce Irvin was one of the more, I don't know if he was underrated, but people didn't talk about him. It was more Michael Bennett given a lot of the glory. When the Seahawks drafted him in the first round, people were making fun of the Seahawks, saying that they reached a lot, because I believe they drafted him in the mid-teens, maybe early 20s. People were thinking he might be a second-round pick at best, but he ended up evolving into one of the better outside pass rushers in the game. I mean, he's not the guy you think of first, obviously, but he can get it done on defense. And now he's going to be a real threat for the Raiders. And I don't know if anybody's going to step in and be able to do what he did for that Seahawk defense.
True. And the thing is, when you have an outside rusher that is so good in the pass game, a lot of times they sell out for those sacks, and they end up being a huge liability in the run. Think like a guy like Jared Allen, a lot of his career. As good as he was, man, he let up so many draws because he's just flying upfield, letting up huge lanes for the run game. But Irvin didn't do that. Yeah, he would fly up the field, but he had the athleticism and the change of direction to be able to close those gaps he would create. And that was one of the things that, when you really start examining what makes a guy on the defensive line good, that's a huge part of it. When he can create pressure but then recover when the offense is trying to take advantage of him.
Exactly. He was an all-around player. He could get sacks, but he could also defend the run, which is exactly what you're looking for in that Seahawk defense.
Mm-hmm. And you can't talk about the Seahawks defense without talking about the Legion of Boom. You know, the original Legion of Boom is back together now with the other corner coming back. I'm blanking on his
Brandon
name.
Browner.
Browner coming back. A little bit slow. He got torched a few times last year, and he was a liability with the Patriots when they won the Super Bowl. But you put him opposite Sherman, and you roll over either Earl Thomas or Cam Chancellor to help him. God, what do you do as an offense?
Run the ball.
Yeah,
you don't throw to those guys.
They are the blueprint that the Patriots followed the year after them, the Broncos followed last year. It's get after the quarterback and have a great secondary, which sounds simple enough, but to be able to do it.
Why doesn't everybody do
Well,
that?
that's the thing. It's like it sounds simple, but it's like to do that with salary cap and a roster limit and finding guys that can stay healthy and keep up with guys. It's so difficult, and the Seahawks really made that blueprint, and I think that their blueprint is now entering the physical primes of their lives, and their experience. They've been to 2 Super Bowls, and if it weren't for the juggernaut that Carolina was last year, they might have made another one.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, let's jump over to record predictions because I think we're both in the same mindset on this team as well. I have the Seahawks going 13-3, being winning the NFC West here, and then I believe, let me just make sure, they'll be the number 2 seed in the NFC.
I also have the Seahawks going 13-3. I think they're going to be the best team in the NFC as well. I have them as the number 1 overall seed for the NFC playoffs, and not just that, I have them as the number 1 overall team in the NFL.
Oh, okay. It very well could happen. I mean, they have all the talent they need, and I think their schedule works out in their favor. You're going to hear a lot of times on these podcasts, we're going to look at stretches of the schedule where maybe teams run into some problems, but there's the only time that the Seahawks have a stretch of tough games really back-to-back. They play at New England in November, but that's surrounded by Buffalo and Philly, who I think are going to be bad. Their worst stretch is early December, where they host Carolina and then go to Green Bay. But you get Carolina at home, at least,
Yeah. And going out to the West Coast, that whole time difference thing is tough on East Coast teams.
For sure. So, let's recap our division predictions here. Number 4 seed for me, or not 4 seed, but the worst team in this division, San Francisco at 3-13 for me. The biggest surprise, I would say, that I have in all of my predictions, LA going 3-13, Jeff Fisher getting fired.
Still baffled.
Arizona 12-4, and then Arizona 12-4 making the playoffs, and Seattle 13-3 winning the division.
Weirdly enough, I have the exact same order as you, but very, very different in the middle. I have the 49ers being the worst team in football, coming in at 2-14. Rams being much better than Bart thinks, coming in at 9-7, and Jeff Fisher not getting fired, and not being 500 for once. Cardinals still being a very good team, coming in at 11-5 and getting a wild card spot. And the Seattle Seahawks being the best team in football, coming in at 13-3 and the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs.
Okay. That was our NFC West predictions. This was the kickoff. There will be 7 more like this with a lot more friends. Surprising we don't have any friends that are fans of NFC West teams, so Wang and I decided
weirdly
to...
enough, we don't have any bandwagon fans.
Yeah, there we go. Wang and I decided to knock this one out and kick these off with a bang. Wang, tell the people where they can find us.
We're on the Twitter machine. You can find us there by searching Fat Guys, capital N as in Nancy Friends. We're on the Facebook machine. You just search Fat Guys and Friends. We're on the Gmail machine. You just search, or you don't search there. That'd be stupid. It's fatguysandfriends@gmail.com. Then we're on the iTunes machine. That's the one where you search. Just type in Fat Guys and Friends, and all of our podcasts will be right there that you can like, share, download, subscribe, and show people so we can become internet famous and make money doing this.
There you go. And if you don't like iTunes, also on YouTube, Wang is our dedicated web and audio editor. Gets all that stuff done for us. Round of applause for Wang. Clap, 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 clap.
It's a real resume booster.
There we go. All right, we will be back soon with another division. Thank you all for listening. Wang, good job, buddy.
You too, bud. Goodbye.
Bye.